And welcome back to Poli-Sci 110. This lecture examines various bureaucratic failures and possible solutions to those failures. Let's first begin with a very basic problem related to bureaucratic agencies. A potential problem with bureaucratic agencies is that many of the individuals who work for them were not elected. And so this leaves open the question about who are bureaucrats or government employees responsible to, whom do they answer to, what are they responsible for, and in particular, who controls them? Bureaucracy opens up the possibility for what are called principal agent problems. Even though bureaucrats are responsible to the president or they answer to the president, many of them may have different goals from what the president wants. And this is regardless of whether the president is a Republican or Democrat. So for example, many government employees remain in their positions for 10, 20, or 30 years at a time. They are experts in their field, and they know very well what their agencies are capable of or not capable of. Presidential administrations, in contrast, tend to last 4 or 8 years. Government employees can easily outlast presidential administrations and the cabinet secretaries that come and go with them, and they can try to conceal their true motives. If a bureaucratic agency has different goals from what the president has, then this opens up a principal agent problem. Why is it called a principal agent problem? Because the president is a principal and the bureaucrat is responsible for implementing what the president wants. That is, the bureaucrat is an agent of the president or the principal. And if the agent and the principal want different things, then there could be a problem. The president has to oversee or monitor what the bureaucracy is doing in order to solve this principal agent problem. Principal agent problems are also known as delegation problems. In real or everyday life, an example of this would be the following. If your car has some sort of problem with the engine, but you are not a mechanic, you have to take your car to a mechanic. You are a principal and you want your car to be fixed. The mechanic is acting as an agent on your behalf in order to fix the car. You want a good mechanic, otherwise the mechanic may lie to you or try to conceal something in order to get more money out of you. That is called a principal agent problem because the mechanic has different goals than what you have, than your goals. You want a good working car, the mechanic wants a salary. Now, of course, this is not intended to suggest that all mechanics are bad. In fact, probably the overwhelming majority are honest, trustworthy mechanics. But principal agent problems may emerge in that sort of relationship. And you may also have principal agent problems in other kinds of trades as well, such as with attorneys, medical doctors as well, or other sorts of businessmen and women. So what are some bureaucratic failures that might emerge as a consequence of the principal agent problem? There are several bureaucratic failures. Major examples include bureaucratic waste, bureaucratic drift, which can lead to bureaucratic capture, and as well, political favoritism or the spoil system, in which political insiders are given cushy jobs within a bureaucratic agency and where they may not have to work very hard. Let's try to explain each of these problems in turn, and then we'll try to explain how to fix them. Let's take bureaucratic waste. Sometimes bureaucracies do things that seemingly are not related to their missions. As an example, the Department of Defense has spent money on alternative energy research, health and disease research, studies of Twitter slang, developing a new beef jerky, and operating a microbrewery. Many of these things don't seem to relate to national defense at all, so why is the Department of Defense spending money on them? Here's why this might be the case. Some of these items may be related to defense in a non-obvious way. However, at the same time, there are items in the defense budget that are not related to defense. Why? Because members of Congress have incentives to hide earmarks or pet projects of theirs in the Department of Defense budget every year. Voting against the Department of Defense budget is often seen as non-patriotic. Members of Congress don't want to vote against defense spending. And so a very big budget with many different line items for spending on different items can often include different things that may not be related to defense, but which powerful members of Congress were able to place into the budget. And so the Department of Defense tends to be bigger than the next 5 departments combined, partly because of earmarks, but those earmarks are a very small percentage of the budget overall. This has attracted some attention on the Hill, with one senator, Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, a former senator, having authored a report called Department of Everything about 10 years ago. There's also bureaucratic drift, and this is also considered a failure of the bureaucracy. Bureaucratic drift occurs when government agencies depart from executing policy or carrying out policy that are consistent with the laws of Congress, and instead they pursue their own agendas. This may occur in part because of, or it may lead to, bureaucratic capture. Bureaucratic capture occurs particularly when private interest groups, such as businesses or perhaps farmers or trade associations, form relationships with those within the bureaucracy, and they begin to persuade the agency to implement laws in ways that Congress does not like or that the president does not like. In other words, the bureaucracy becomes captured by the special interest group, and they no longer are implementing the laws of Congress by the book. And so this is a major problem for multiple bureaucratic agencies, given that many of them work with various private entities, particularly, for example, the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Department of Agriculture. Many of these federal agencies work with private entities often who provide input on different rules or proposed rules that those agencies are considering. This may lead as well to agencies spending money inefficiently, and the agency could also possibly become corrupt and take bribes. So for example, about 6 years ago, there was a Fat Leonard scandal in which a military contractor bribed members of the Navy for more contracts. This ultimately led to millions of dollars in wasteful spending. So how do we solve these problems related to bureaucratic failure? One major way is through oversight. Both the president and Congress can oversee bureaucracy in different ways. The president has the most direct oversight of the bureaucracy. The president oversees bureaucracy by appointing secretaries and undersecretaries to manage the agencies. The president can also issue executive orders that instruct bureaucratic agencies how to carry out their jobs. The president can also request more or less funding for particular agencies whom he or she likes or dislikes. The president can also choose to reorganize an agency, possibly removing recalcitrant officials who are not interested in carrying out the president's agenda. And as well, the president closely monitors all new rules that agencies implement under his or her watch through the Office of Management and Budget. So the type of oversight the president engages or deals or engages with to keep track of the bureaucracy is direct oversight or direct management in some cases. Congress, however, takes a very different approach to overseeing bureaucracy. With Congress, in Congress, often whistleblowers are responsible for coming forward and alerting members of Congress to problems that they are experiencing with bureaucratic agencies. Congress has passed an act, the Whistleblower Protection Act in 1989, to protect internal employees of bureaucracies who come forward and explain that various agencies might be spending money wastefully or not carrying out the laws as Congress has passed. And so these individuals, these whistleblowers, can alert Congress, and in particular various committees within Congress, that there are problems within the federal bureaucracy and that some changes or oversight might be needed. This act does not protect people who reveal national security secrets, for example. And so the difference between congressional oversight and presidential oversight is that the president takes a more direct kind of oversight and may manage bureaucratic agencies directly. Congress, on the other hand, tends to wait for whistleblowers, citizens, or interest groups to come forward and let them know if they're having a problem. This is called a fire alarm model of oversight. In other words, whereas the president constantly polices the actions of bureaucratic agencies, Congress has a fire alarm. And if it's a metaphorical fire alarm. And if someone is experiencing an issue with an agency, then they can alert their members of Congress to it. And the member of Congress may very well have a committee hearing on the topic and then an investigation. As an example, when different conservative organizations claimed to be treated unfairly by the Internal Revenue Service about 10 years ago, they approached their members of Congress for help, and this gained news attention and ultimately led to some officials in the IRS resigning. And so once someone brings the metaphorical fire alarm in Congress, Congress may amend the law, change the budget for the bureaucratic agency, or hold hearings to gather more information. Congress, therefore, takes a passive approach to overseeing bureaucracy, whereas the president has a more active approach.